Group Live, being held at 21 Summit 2022 of Orlando, Florida. Our final day, day 4 in 2022 here in October. This episode, the first of the day, is called The State of Masculinity. It's intended to be kind of an end cap, not only to 21 Summit, one of several episodes today, but an end cap to the 21 Convention specifically for men, where we are making men alpha again. I'm joined by four guest speakers from the event. And just to get started, I want to go down the line, starting with Brian. Kind of introduce yourself and the basics of who you are for not the online audience. Where you came from and who you are.
Sure. My name is Brian Sauvé, and I am married, been married for more than 10 years now to my wife, and we have 6 kids together. We live in Ogden, Utah, and I pastor a church there called Refuge, where I am interested in recovering Reformed and Protestant Christianity. So I confess the Westminster Confession of Faith, and I am boringly Orthodox in my theology, and my whole goal is to make everybody Christians. And that's probably about it.
Andy?
How you doing, everybody? My name is Allende Gordon. I recently found myself on YouTube, so I'm pushing a YouTube channel that's there to help guys develop confidence, self-esteem, working and struggling with issues of masculinity. So that's pretty much what we're doing right now, just trying to inspire guys, get them feeling good about themselves, finding something competitive to build confidence.
Those of you who don't know, I'm Anthony Johnson, founder of the 21 Convention, 21 Studios, and 21 Summit, co-founder of the Redman Group. I started this whole studio, 21 Studios, and this whole company when I was 17 years old, and I've been doing it ever since for 16 years now. So I love doing it. It's what I do every day, all these videos, all the events, and I look forward to doing it to infinity and beyond.
Arthur Kwon Lee. I'm a painter, Christian, anarchist.
Pat Stedman, dating and relationship coach for men, also known as America's most wanted dating coach. And I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm married, mostly focused on deprogramming guys from limiting beliefs and all the psychological trauma from modern society.
So I wanted to use this episode to talk about issues that were specific to men, not fathers, not to women, not to wider cultural issues, but to men and to masculinity. So we're going to talk about sex, we're going to talk about game, we're going to talk about seduction, we're going to talk about masculinity, a whole variety of things we're going to get into. We'll see where Brian can fit in on these issues. So to get started, I want to compare and contrast. I want to dig into actually, Pat Stedman is the only official dating coach up here. I think Allende might fit in that as well, though, too. Pat, can you talk to me about your evolution as a dating coach when you started 8 or so years ago and how you got to where you are today and how you've seen the industry change that you work in?
Yeah, so I got into game and all that stuff back in 2008, sort of more of in the classic PUA era, although I never would have classified myself as a PUA. But the industry's evolved quite a bit over that time period. It used to be very, very heavy game focused. And then a lot of the red pill stuff kind of came into the mix. I'm talking about more broader sexual dynamics. Things started to get really focused on looks and online dating and hacking stuff. The main thing I'd basically say, though, how stuff's changed since I started, is that people are just way more fucked up. The amount of trauma and issues that people have, men and women, is just out of control. And so you're dealing with, even from 2015 when I started professionally working, it's just a totally different landscape. Girls have way higher notch counts than they used to have, and guys are way more insecure. So a lot of times you're even working on just basic communication between the sexes and on a kind of romantic level. Because a lot of guys are freaked out about even going down that path. Most people, to the extent that they've dated, have only dated online. And that's pretty messed up just because the algorithms and whatnot for the apps are not usually too conducive for guys, unless you're a very specific subset of guys. So a lot of it's getting back to basic principles for best practices. So dealing with a lot of the mental stuff that guys have to, that's been holding them back from even getting out there, but then kind of just socializing them. sometimes. That's what you have to do. Also, just within relationships, I mean, that's a whole other set of issues we can maybe talk about later. But there's been definitely this collapse in relationships between the sexes.
Yeah, well put, well put. Ayende, you've been coaching for a little while here, and you have a YouTube channel. It's been blown up here, approaching 20,000, I think.
It's getting there.
How have you seen the manosphere evolve in the years that you've been observing it and kind of involved? And what kind of questions do you see from men today versus a couple of years ago?
I think some years ago, it was a lot more about discussion. It was a lot more about, understanding perspectives and helping guys to recognize all these different issues that are going on and maybe what the root of their dissatisfaction is coming from. But I think a lot of new creators have come into the space and basically just made it somewhere to monetize off of these woes rather than discussing them and philosophizing, just why is this happening and what can we do? It's become more of let's complain and you pay me to complain. Yeah. Is how I feel about it. And it's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blaming, but very little problem solving, very little suggestions and solutions that guys can, put into their own lives and get better results. And I'm a solution oriented person. You know what I mean? I want to solve the problem. I don't want to dwell on the problem or obsess over it. And a lot of guys come to me unsatisfied in different areas of their lives, but I feel like their main reason for wanting better results is kind of always pointed towards women. And I mean, I can understand that because for guys not getting something, maybe not just women, but not getting something, you tend to kind of put that thing on a pedestal. You make it the best thing ever. And maybe if you had it or you had more access to it, you'd realize this is nice, but it's not the most important thing. Now I can kind of focus on a purpose. So I even feel a lot of men are actually distracted by not being able to participate in things that should be fundamentally entitled to everyone to some degree. So every man should be able to feel good about himself for one reason or another, find something that brings him satisfaction and fulfillment. And every guy should have some type of interaction with women. So I feel like if you're not getting it at all, you could kind of be stuck in a rut. And then we start seeing the depression, all these other issues coming with young men and men of all ages, actually. So there's different levels to it. Some guys it's divorce. Some guys it's their kids being taken from them. Some guys it's not being appreciated in their industry. So there's all these different things. And I feel like it's very little help out there, or legitimate help, I should say. So I'm looking more for that than to monetize the suffering.
Yeah, the constant cash grab we've seen.
Right.
And yeah, back in the old days of the manosphere, that was like, it existed, but it was much less common than you see now. Mm-hmm. It's gotten a lot more aggressive. Brian, I want to move to you. So I'm not sure exactly how many years you've been aware of and observing the manosphere, but for some degree of time you have, for sure. But also you've been observing as a pastor and as a man and as a father, like Pat Stedman was talking about just a few minutes ago, this kind of collapse of the relationship between the sexes and the dating marketplace, or the sexual marketplace, as some people call it. So what have been your observations of dating over the past 5 to 10 years in America? This is an observer out in the world. You've been married for 10 years, so we're not actively in the marketplace. Right. What are your observations and what do you see? What are your concerns?
I think a lot of what we're seeing culturally is the expression of a broad fatherlessness. So I would characterize our culture as a post-Christian or apostate Christian culture, meaning that most of us, we're now growing up in a world, in a country, at least in the United States, that was founded on Christian identity, self-consciously Christian identity, especially if you go back to, say, the 17th century colonies in early North American history or early American history. And then through the next several hundred years, we have a country that's dominated by Christian thought, where men are essentially finding their identity as sons of the Father, sons of God the Father. They're finding their normative, this is how you go about being a man. This is how women go about being a woman. These are our aims in life. I'd like to, be married, win a woman, be faithful to her for life, have children with her, disciple those children in the faith, raise them up to do worthy work in their vocation, go out into the world in God's name and take dominion there. And as we've seen a decline of Christian influence culturally, I think what you see is that anytime the previous dominating sort of paradigm for a culture goes away, it's not that you see nothing happen. It's always a job opening, and then the vacuum's filled. Nature abhors a vacuum. So what we see in a culture where Christian fatherhood has been sort of replaced by people who really don't know what it means to be a father or man, or they don't have an abiding cultural vision for marriage and family and sexed piety, is that you'll see other fathers come and step in. And so you can look at many different archetypal, different sorts of fathers that have stepped in and aim to disciple people. Some fathers will come in and they're just completely grifters. And I think we've all seen that, who are basically, like you said, just trying to monetize male suffering, say, come under my wing, be like me. And this is just discipleship. That's all it is.
Cult of personality.
Yeah, cult of personality,
yeah.
Where a father figure steps in a bastard culture and says, I'll be your dad. And, that can absolutely be a good thing, to step in and be a father. But where you see this in the dating marketplace, I think, is that you have men who don't know, they intuit that they want something. They were oriented to the woman by creation. So they are supposed to want to win a woman. The whole story of the Bible is kill the dragon, get the girl, as Pastor Douglas Wilson says. So every man has deep in his heart the desire to go and, overcome obstacles, win the respect of a worthy woman, and win her, woo her, and make her his wife. That's just deep in the heart of every man. When you remove that telos or you undermine it, men still have that desire, but they don't know what to do with it. And so I think what you see are men who are responding in all sorts of dysfunctional ways. You see men who are, passive, and they'll replace that real conquest with fake conquest, with digital sex through pornography, with casual hookup culture. You could even see pickup artist culture coming in as false fathers to these bastard sons. And I think this happens to women as well, where they're also looking for fathers and also being discipled towards different ends. And at the end of the day, what it ends up doing is dislocating human sexuality from its proper setting in covenantal marriage for life and childbearing and legacy building in the name of Christ. And you end up with just sort of the blind leading the blind. And Christ says, if the blind lead the blind, they both fall in a pit. And so I think that's what you're seeing, just widespread collapse of sexual norms, because nobody really knows what they're aiming for anymore.
Yeah.
Or who's supposed to tell them what they're aiming for.
Well, how do you know which of the 500 genders you're even attracted to?
Exactly. Like which of them? Well, which are you too? I mean, there's so many variables. So we do see in the church lots of young men come in and don't know how to have a conversation with an adult, don't know how to make eye contact, shake a hand, don't know how to win a woman. And so a lot of, I think Pastor Michael's probably experiences as well. Quite a bit of pastoral ministry these days requires a blue collar understanding of these just sex piety realities. Son, let me explain to you how to be a man, how to talk to a woman, how to have a conversation. And, I've seen lots of young men, though, successfully orient, get married, have children, get vocational success, become respectable. And to me, what's amazing about that is that they've just changed the trajectory for probably hundreds of years in their family line when that happens. And this is, I think, just an evidence of God's grace, promising to, he visits the sin of the father on the third and fourth generation, but he shows his faithfulness to the 1,000th generation of those who love him and keep his commands. It's the promise in Deuteronomy. So, that's my hope, is that we'll see this culture successfully rediscipled, oriented back to that pole star of a Christian sexual ethic, and have sex put in its proper place as not a god, but as a good gift of a father, and know what to do with it again.
I want to move on to Arthur. So you're an artist, you're a painter, classically trained. You're also a high testosterone alpha male. So rooftop Korean as well.
Boom.
But I want to get your observations. You're very aware of what's happening in culture. You've been that way for several years. You went through your whole cancel culture moment, where you got canceled from a lot of art galleries and stuff like that. You have the news. I've seen you on Newsmax and other stuff like that. So what have been your observations, just as an artist and as a painter?
Well, I agree with Brian, first of all. I mean,
Okay.
we're living in a degenerate age when it comes to sexual dynamics, and it's because we're living in a time that doesn't recognize fathers and how they're the bedrock of a civilization, and how that applies to culture as well as all these manifestations of, masculinity. It's the pendulum swinging the other way as far as it can in a public square that demonizes any semblance of masculinity. You look at every phenomena, whether it's rap culture, right? That's all trying to be like that's super masculinity right there, right? Donald Trump, Andrew Tate. Every phenomena is unapologetic masculinity for a reason. And it's because masculinity will save the world here, right? So I think the reason why everything's run amok is because we're allowing the proliferation of the state. And that state power has fetishized masculinity. So we need men to stand up for what's right locally first. So not to be so religious, but once we start defining our masculinity based on the opposite sex, then it's still a limited form. We need to sort of look at a higher order and recognize that men are the arbiters of society. And that's always my vantage point. And that's definitely also built because I'm an artist. So there's a cultural critique that I'm always, approaching this from. But I do believe that is the solution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said something about masculinity that it will save the world, and I've been saying since 2018. A lot of it comes from like one of our speakers, Jack Donovan, looking at his work. But I think that masculinity definitively is what built America from the not only pre-1776, but since the founding onwards. It's men and it's masculinity that built America, particularly what they call toxic masculinity now. So my view is that the only thing that can save a country from collapse and make it better in the future is what built it in the first place. And if you don't have even the foundations anymore of what built it, then it's going to all fall apart. So
Yeah, there's this whole, Aristotle once said that there's two problems in society, and it comes from young people. One is from unchanneled male aggression, and unchanneled is in parentheses because it's, it's italicized, and that's for emphasis, because aggression can be channeled for good or for bad, right? You can be creative with it. So unchanneled male aggression, and the other is female vanity. And that still applies today, right? And the reality is, I
think I've seen some female vanity on Instagram.
Oh yeah, a little bit, yeah. The hypergamy is just so out of whack today. What is the saying that modern women want traditional men without being traditional women? That's the saying, right? Well, I don't think they realize that we have not seen the result of what's going to happen in the aftermath of we call it the wall, right?
Yeah.
We're about to hit a big fucking Donald Trump wall.
Well, I think what you mean is that there's going to be like a generational wall.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a lot of these girls don't realize they're living their life on easy mode, and something's going to hit them really hard, especially women in cities. So Brian, I mean, you're blessed, brother. You're away from all this, city girls, as they call it, right?
You're in New York City, yeah?
I just left New York, but I'm in DC, so it's.
Give it up, guys. A woman. Get out of that. Excuse me.
Yeah, I got you.
I want to go to Pat Stedman here and then Allende after that, because I think both of you will have a lot to say on this. Throughout the panel today and even throughout the convention, I think a good way to put a lot what we talk about is men today, we're observing a lot. You guys are talking about your observations, but there's incompetence with women, and then as a man, and then there's incompetence with masculinity, even being a man in the first place. So talk to me about the relationship between, just from an ignorance or incompetence perspective, like you don't know. Like when I was young, I didn't know how to talk to girls. That's why I started this convention. I was like, I want to have sex with hot women, and I don't know how to do that. I don't like that. Yeah. So I'm gonna fix that. Just from an ignorance and like frustration perspective. So what's the relationship in your view as a coach between the incompetence with being a man, with masculinity, and then with talking to women? Whatever your particular moral beliefs are behind it, just from an incompetence perspective.
Yeah, just real quick before I jump into that, because I think it also segues into it. A lot of what you see going on here is